So earlier this year, we read a book called Running a Dream by one famous author, Matt Fitzgerald. And in our talk with Matt, he explained that following the example set by the professionals is a good thing to do. Those guys know what they're doing, he said. And basically, if you could follow their example at your reduced level, you can really perhaps yield some amazing results if you're willing to commit. So this year I thought, that seems like a good idea. I'll give that a go. So I started doing a bit more mileage, quite a bit more mileage. But I was targeted with the way I did the workouts. Did some double days, focused a bit more on my diet. So I'm really taking all the benefits from running the dream. Started doing some stretching. My daughter teaches yoga. She started giving me a yoga session. I did some strength work. Because I'm retired, I can fit all these things in. Fantastic. I was following James Dunn from the UK with his systems. Then I started looking at my form with Shane Benzies and his Lost Art of Running. Watch this space, coming to a podcast that you love soon. And I even did the ultimate professional thing, started taking naps. So I piled all this together. And this year, Liz has been talking about trying to put together a 3-hour marathon. And the only time I've ever done a 3-hour marathon was 22 years ago. I did one sub 3-hour marathon. But I thought, maybe a comeback is on. I read Running the Dream. Matt did a fantastic comeback in that with his marathon. Not quite 22 years, but quite a lot of years. So I thought, but am I really in the right mental space to try and deliver a 22-year PR? That's pretty crazy. But now I've noticed Matt has a new book out, and he's going to help me with my mental space. So let's hear about The Comeback Quotient by Matt Fitzgerald. Hi, and welcome to Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review the running books so you can decide whether it's worth reading for yourself. We hope listening to us chat about running can help you stay motivated about your own running, and that maybe you could be a bit inspired to try something new, to try something different, to get motivated. My name's Alan, and with my co-host Liz, we're going to talk today with author Matt Fitzgerald about his new book and second book released in 2020, I think. The Comeback Quotient.
So this book is part self-help book, part personal experience, and part compilation of inspiring stories about defying the odds. There are 9 chapters with a portion of Matt's training journey leading up to the Santa Rosa Ironman Triathlon at the end of each chapter. Matt wanted to make a comeback of his own, and he tried to apply some of the things he learned to make the best of his situation. In the first chapter, Matt explains what an ultrarealist is, and the other chapters detail how ultrarealists deal with setbacks and the steps we can take to be more like an ultrarealist. There are many stories about famous athletes who have accomplished spectacular things in the face of adversity. Some of the big names are Lionel Sanders, Seidel, who recently was second in the US Olympic Trials Marathon, Petra Majdic, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right, but she was a skier, Bob Krar, and that's just to name a few. The last 2 chapters are about coming back from self-sabotage, which is something that probably a lot of us do, and what happens when comebacks fail. Because if we're honest, these are also potential outcomes of planning a comeback. So a little bit about Matt. I mean, he's very accomplished. So he's a lifelong runner and endurance athlete. He's been running since the age of 11. He later branched out to triathlon and did 2 Ironman triathlons. So the second one is in the book. So now we know when that happened. He ran a sub 240 marathon after years of trying and not succeeding. And he's also a running coach and a triathlon coach. He's got many books, certified sports nutritionist. very long resume. Welcome again to the podcast, Matt. Thanks for being here.
It's great to be back.
So the first question is, how do you release 2 books in the same year? Because the other one was just released in the spring, and now you've got a second one, and the year's not even over.
Yeah, I don't think this is the first calendar year in which I've had more than one book released. What can I say? I'm just happy I'm able to get away with it. I have lots of ideas, and I like to write every day, and it's possible to write 2 books a year. The question really is, do publishers want to release 2 or more books by the same author in a single year? My agent tells me that some publishers, when I come to them with a new proposal, that some of them who turn me down do so on the grounds that I write too damn many books.
Really?
I think this is 28 books you got now, something like that. Are you counting?
No.
You're having a party at 50 books or something?
Well, I mean, I've counted. I counted last time, and I think last time I had counted 27, so this must be 28.
Must be.
Yeah.
Must
We
be.
had Chris McDougall on a few weeks ago, and I think I probably said that he was probably the most prestigious author we'd spoken to, but by far and away, you're the most prolific.
Mm-hmm.
You get the crown for that.
Yeah, I might prefer to be prestigious. It's too late now.
Maybe I'm wrong, of course. I just figured, he wrote Born to Run. Everybody seems to know Born to Run. So.
Yeah, that book probably sold as many copies as my 28 combined, or more.
Yeah, I guess the key is that he sold them to also non-runners. I don't know. Maybe you got to find a way to relate running to non-runners, but or just, get more runners to read about running, because reading about running is great.
Since we last talked to you, Matt, 2020 has happened, basically, almost most part of it, which has given even people who've got through it quite well some major challenges. So challenges have gone from small to enormous. People have lost loved ones, etc. How's 2020 treated you? Because I know you're married to Nataki.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Who's a black lady. So all of the US Black Lives Matter and stress around that and difficulties around that. And did I hear that you had a brush with COVID as well?
Yeah. I feel like 2020 is the year history came home to me. I think, I may never know for sure if I had COVID, but, I would bet my life savings on it. I was quite sick for a month in March and April. Then, yes, the whole George Floyd conflagration happened. And I was blindsided by that one in the sense of just how deeply affected I was by it. I would have expected to be affected, but I could not stop thinking about it for a long time. It got in the way of sleep and work and just struggled with that. And then, here in California, we had the wildfires.
Oh, yes.
And I was quite affected by those too. I tried to be careful. I moved all my training indoors for a period of time and was even wearing a mask indoors. Thankfully I had masks handy.
Yeah.
But,
no shortage of that.
I really felt it. I would get, headaches and just this, raw throat. And then I developed a kind of like a mystery health condition right around the time the smoke cleared and I got back outside. And initially I had all kinds of theories, maybe iron deficiency or, maybe a supplement I was having a bad reaction to. But now my theory is, and this is unconfirmed as well, that inhaling those wildfire smoke particulates triggered a COVID long haul scenario because I've got all the symptoms. I'm now 8 weeks into that. It's not getting better and it's not good. I really can't run much. And just so, I'm trying to see if I can manage the symptoms or eventually maybe with these T cell tests. I'm too late for testing for the active virus, too late for testing even for antibodies. But maybe it doesn't even matter if it's diagnosed or not. But anywho, yeah. So from COVID to the racial strife in the U.S. to wildfires, I've been personally affected by all three.
Good time to write your Comeback Quotient book. You're going to need it
exactly.
to
So
yourself.
Time to take my own advice.
We hope your fitness helps you in terms of getting you back on a fit and healthy route. And from a family point of view, we send you our best thoughts. Canada's a little bit distant from some of the effects, but we watch them very, very closely. We've been watching all the political machinations in the US very closely and hoping that they get resolved, and hopefully we'll see some unification of disparate views and moving towards a better situation with respect to the political climate. Maybe we won't get into the political climate too much, but it's kind of an essential part of the US performing well, I think.
Yes, as they say, when the United States sneezes, the world catches a cold.
Yeah,
I've heard that one before.
Yeah.
So, how did you get the idea for this book?
I view it as kind of a follow-on to How Bad Do You Want It, which is a deep dive into the psychology of endurance sports, which just fascinates me. In that book, it has a similar mixture of narrative and science, particularly psychology, but even a little bit of neuroscience. And the knock on that one, I mean, that book did well, and people like it and seem to have gotten a lot out of it. But the criticism I've gotten from a few people was that it's not practical enough. That it's definitely more on the inspirational side. I mean, I have to say, as a coach, I'm a big believer that you can only hold athletes' hands so much. And that, part of what I actually like about running is that no matter how much good advice you get, you have to figure some stuff out for yourself. Nevertheless, I did have more to say on the subject, and the Comeback Quotient is essentially that. If I get one more shot at helping runners negotiate the mental side of improving and even just enjoying a richer journey in the sport, this book represents the second half of my message.
Well, when I first started running, and then also later on when I restarted running under a coach, I kind of very much enjoyed the dynamic of, like, you write it on the piece of paper and all I have to do is wake up in the morning, look what's written on the piece of paper, and I go out and I do that workout. And I loved that relationship. Like, I liked that I didn't have to plan and I didn't have to, but I later found out that we're all kind of an experiment of one. And it was kind of disappointing to find out, because I really liked the you plan, I just execute, and I will do whatever you write on that paper. Yeah, we are all in pretty much an experiment of one, and I guess that's why I like to have like little tips and things to try. So I guess before we get into sort of the heart of the book, like at the beginning, you have some terms that you introduce. So the first one is an ultrarealist. And I guess along the same lines is mental fitness and comeback. So I guess maybe we should start by defining those three, starting with the ultra-realist, because I think that's probably the most important part of the book.
Yeah, so I mean, that gets right to my message. Experience has taught me that what distinguishes the athletes who are capable of making the very best of the very worst situations is a willingness and capacity to fully face reality. And that, when an athlete fails to make the best of a situation, and I'm choosing my words carefully, I don't mean that you can necessarily achieve your plan A goal regardless of what happens if you just have your stuff together. I'm not saying that at all. I mean, just that, making the best of the situation, the best that is actually possible. A lot of times when we encounter challenges and setbacks, we don't even do that much. We leave some possibility on the table. And in my experience, that always occurs in one way or another because an athlete has failed to fully face the reality that they're confronting. An ultra realist is someone who's just kind of a role model in facing reality in difficult situations.
And so then, let's say mental fitness. I guess that because those were terms kind of used in the first chapter. So I guess maybe a mental fitness, and then what would you categorize as a comeback?
Right. Yeah. So mental fitness I define as the ability to make the best of a bad situation. Very simply. There's a phrase I use also, I believe in that same chapter, I think, which helps athletes get their heads around the idea. Physical fitness allows you to do difficult things. Mental fitness allows you to deal with difficult things. And I think you really need both in order to, fulfill your potential as a runner. And then, comeback, I define very broadly in the book. And it's just, a comeback is really just the actuality of making the best of a situation where things did not go your way in one way or another. It could be injury, illness, pandemic, any of a number of setbacks that occur in your life that affect your running. So yeah, comebacks come in all shapes and sizes.
Would it be true that when you're a runner, you tend to focus on running, and hence your physical fitness, and maybe not so much? So where's my head around this? You hear people saying, "Oh, I'm not a real runner." Yes, you are. Fess up to it. You're doing that right foot, left foot thing down the street. That's running. You're a runner. But sort of mentally, you hear that a lot in our club when we're just all casual enthusiasts. You hear that a lot, and does that sort of illustrate the fact that although people are embarking upon the physical journey, they're not so much thinking about the mental journey, and maybe they're not investing as much into that.
I see that a lot. There are people who just sort of take the mental component of being a runner for granted, because your mind is always going along for the ride. It's playing an active role, whether you choose to step back from it and consider whether whether there's room for improvement in how you regulate your thoughts and emotions and so forth. Then there are people who really do struggle on the mental side and are very much aware of it. I see, a lot of people who fit into that category. And then I think there are some athletes who just have a rock solid mental game. They were kind of born that way. And they also take it for granted. I'm reminded of that quote from the legendary Australian running coach, Percy Cerruti, who I talk about in the book. He said, it's just pain.
Yeah. When he said that, though, it's what he meant is it's just somebody else's pain.
Right.
Just slightly different.
Yes. Easy for you to say.
Yeah, exactly.
So you had your own comeback with the Ironman, because you had done only one before, and so you decided to do another one to see if you can qualify for Kona in your age group. And it seemed like, if the timeline is right in my head, that it came right after your 13 weeks with the Hoka Nazali team. So did that sort of influence your decision? Did you think well, since I've done, you did a comeback in the marathon, and so was that sort of did that sort of bring you to think that maybe other comebacks would be possible?
They were actually a couple of years apart. I completed my journey as a fake pro runner in October of 2017. And, it went really well, and it was just, a peak experience, as Maslow would say. I came home just thinking, I'm not done yet. What's next?
Got all this super fitness.
Yeah.
Right. And, I just felt like also I had gained some things through that experience that age couldn't take away. So I wasn't really worried about facing 47 or whatever. So, my immediate ambition was to try to run a faster marathon, but I struggled with the same injury, hip injury that I suffered when I was in Flagstaff and described in the book. And my athletic career, it's a story of unfinished business. Running the dream was all about unfinished business. And, I had done that one Ironman, and in that Ironman, I missed a qualifying slot for the World Championship in Kona by 23 seconds. It's not like, yeah, I know, in a 10-hour race.
Oh, that's terrible.
Well, I honestly,
it's fantastic because it means that you were so close, but it's like you were so close.
Right. But I did, in the book, I didn't want to just, improving your mental game is not easy. And it's so easy. What is easy is to be Percy Cerruti and say it's only pain, to tell people what to do and then not do it yourself. So I really wanted to include a component in the book where I walked the talk, that I showed these principles in action, and in sort of a high stakes way, again, similar to the fake pro runner thing, where there was no guarantee that it was not going to fall apart. So it remained to be seen how, what I would get out of practicing what I preached. So I wanted to do it anyway, but then, the book gave me, the final excuse I needed to, dust off my bike and start shaving my legs again.
So I guess the next question is, so Alan has a running hero. Her name is Molly Seidel. It's pretty new.
Uh-huh.
A new running hero. Yeah.
Right
just
on.
kind of over the last year. You might have seen we covered Matt Hart's book about Nike, win at all costs, and that led me to rethink where I'm spending my money on shoes.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I was orientating myself towards the new Saucony shoes because one, they're good. Saucony are a signatory to the Clean Sport Collective, so I thought, oh, that's a good little feel good thing, and then I saw Molly popping up from nowhere in the trials, wearing these shoes, and listened to her around podcasts, etc., and really enjoyed her attitude. And so I've adopted a new superhero in the running. So if you're listening, Molly, I'm now your number one fan. But I noticed that that's some of my reasoning around that. And then later I found out that in the comeback aspects of it, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about her difficulties. But your hero seemed to be in the book Joan Benoit or Joan Benoit Samuelson. What was it about Joan Benoit, other than the obvious, she's a fast runner?
Right. Well, it was just she caught me at an impressionable age. It was 1983 when I was 11 years old. My father ran the Boston Marathon that year, and the whole family trooped down from New Hampshire, where I grew up, to watch him run. And I don't remember exactly. I think I knew who Bill Rogers was before that day. I'm not sure if I knew who Joan Benoit, as she was at the time, was. But I sure knew after the race, because we got to see, we were hopscotching from Hopkinton to Boston and got to see the elites. And, she ran a world best for the marathon distance for women that day, and I witnessed it in person. So yeah, she was an athletic hero of mine instantly. I was proud of my dad, but Joan was something else. And she's just an awesome personality. You can admire greatness no matter what kind of personality comes with it, but I loved her personality. And she was also, kind of a local girl. She was from Maine, our next door neighbor. And so I just, I became a fan, started following her career, which had ups and downs. She won the first Olympic marathon for women the very next year, but she had a major setback before then, which is famous. Probably most people listening know about her knee injury, which it was touch and go right up to the 11th hour. And she, for the trials, I should say, and she ran the trials with severely compromised fitness because of all the training she had missed. She had, had a arthroscopic surgery, and it was her mental game that really carried her through, that even gave her the chance to compete for the gold medal in Los Angeles. So she is what I would call an ultra realist. And I try to, I don't want that to be an empty term. I really, when I tell these stories, I try to, the way that fans of sports approach comebacks is we just stand in awe, and we think, wow, a superhero did something I couldn't ever dream of doing. And I want to show, no, there's a process here. All these folks are doing the same thing underneath, superficial differences in their stories. And so I sort of pick apart, Joan Benoit's comeback to show how she did what she did, and how, maybe we will never be Joan Benoit ourselves, but we can be more like her.
Mm-hmm. Actually, it's funny you say that, because it's a little bit like the Olympic trials for women. I mean, because I don't know, I like to watch them every year, even though it's it's the US, but I know some of the big names from the previous years, and I didn't know Alifine, I didn't know about Molly Seidel. And so for me, it came up like, oh my gosh, it's this new person from nowhere. But no, she's been a runner for so long. Like, after, in your book, you tell her story and all that she's been through. And it was like, that moment was years in the making, but we don't really realize it. It's sort of like, we just see it happen and we're like, oh, she had a really good day. But it was actually years and years of different issues that she had along the way.
Yeah, and some days in there when it wasn't looking good, for her future prospects. And I find that just learning about those stories as an athlete myself, it's comforting in a way to know that the greatest athletes on the planet struggle in precisely the same way we do, and they're human. They're more talented than we are, but when they're able to overcome those kinds of challenges, there's a blueprint there. And sooner or later, if things are going for you well today as a runner, well, just wait a day. I mean, setbacks will happen. So it's nice to have some tools in place, right? And honestly, I try to make the point, especially in the last chapter of the book, that even when things are going almost perfectly, you can still, get inch a little bit closer to perfect by having a strong mental game.
Yeah, I mean, for people who don't know, Molly Seidel had a big struggle with eating problems, serious difficulties in being treated for conditions. Also had injuries and was very fragile because of a consequence of that. So she was in a bad mental space and she was in a bad physical space. Made some phenomenal decisions through that process to get where she is now. An overnight sensation, arriving to qualify in her first marathon. Nobody sees the rest of the iceberg, which was the fight and the decision-making process that she went through. One of the things that I'm not sure whether it was in your book or I heard it elsewhere was she turned down a professional contract with Saucony initially because she was being an ultra-realist. She realized that that wasn't what she had to do at that point in time, which was to run according to a contractual obligation that wasn't for her. In order to be the best that she could possibly be, she needed to have more time. And then she came around later and maybe has a lesser contract because it was later in her cycle, but was able to get to that point because of those hard decisions.
Yes, she actually turned down a number of. I mean, she was a hot prospect coming out of Notre Dame, and had many offers that she turned down. And hers is a really good example of how, honestly, judgment and even character factor into mental fitness, which I love. I think it's a good thing that having good judgment or exercising good judgment and holding yourself to high standards of character can help you as an athlete, at least in the long term.
So you have sort of like well, I'm going to say it's like a 3-step process to thinking like an ultra realist. And the first step is accepting reality. How do you describe the way that ultra realists accept reality versus how most of the rest of us do?
Well, there's each chapter in the book begins with a little epigraph, and there's one from T.S. Eliot that I only discovered after I finished the book, which I wish I had discovered earlier. The poet T.S. Eliot, who said, humankind cannot tolerate very much reality. So, I think this ultra realist concept, this idea that the essence of mental fitness is the ability and willingness to fully face reality. I think that I anticipate that will probably just come out of nowhere for a lot of runners. It's part of the reason I wrote this book. Like, I'm not going to write a book that just reiterates what other people are already saying. I look for the places where I have something to contribute. But even though it's kind of I think it's a novel message. Like, I'm not on an island here. Like, I'm not the only person who believes these things. It's just, I'm saying them somewhat differently. So I think my insight has a ton of overlap with things like Buddhist philosophy and Stoicism, and more recently, even some, empirical psychology. And so that idea that wishing things were other than they were is like the number one psychological failing of humankind, in terms of like, why do we fail to make the best of bad situations? Our first misstep is failing to accept reality. It's hard. That's why. Our instincts kind of compel us to turn away from difficult realities.
It's easier to mentally bail at that point. So
yes,
it doesn't fit my current mental picture.
Right.
Therefore, forget it.
Right.
I now have the perfect excuse for not achieving or not maximizing, because I'm never going to hit the original target or whatever.
Yeah.
I think the example that you give in the book with Petra Majdic, I don't know how to pronounce these Islamic names, the skier.
Yes, we'll just call her Petra.
Let's call her Petra.
That had me, when I was halfway through reading the book, I was going out doing a training run with Liz, and I said, Liz, have you read the chapter about the Slovenian skier? Have you read the example yet? Read it. It's totally impossible. It's amazing. So in terms of choosing an example from somewhere maybe we haven't seen it, we haven't heard it, and just creating the exact impression of the ultimate in accepting reality, and squeezing as much out of the lemon once you've got the problem, squeezing as much out of it as possible. That was the most incredible example. Maybe you could tell.
Sure. Yeah. So Petra, as we're calling her, is a Slovenian cross-country skier who had a long career with lots of promise and lots of great performances everywhere except the Olympics. But it took her a while. I think for her, the theme I kind of emphasize is that she came from a small country that had no history of success, not a heck of a lot of support, kind of like an inferiority complex that she in a way internalized, just by virtue of her nationality, that may have held her back on the highest stage. And then the 2010 Olympics? I know I wrote the book in British Columbia, Vancouver, was sort of like her final chance. Like, she had been absolutely kicking butt on the World Cup scene leading up to it. She was on fire, as fit as she'd ever been. She wasn't going to get another chance like that in 4 years, and this was her third Olympics. And then she fell into a gully warming up for her first race, and suffered some injuries that they could only be diagnosed later, but very, very painful and debilitating injuries to her rib area that probably would have caused almost any other athlete to raise a white flag and say, oh, well, this is disappointing. But she went ahead and competed. And although she was considered a strong contender for gold.
She fell hard enough to break her skis and poles.
Yes.
It
Yes.
wasn't a oh oops type
Yeah.
of injury. It was pretty substantial if you're going to break your equipment while you're doing it.
Yeah. And, you know, it's a little bit of a, I mean, there are a few stories in here that, you know, part of my agenda is what's your excuse? when you see, because nobody can do anything that's impossible. Like, right? I'm not saying, look, this miracle woman from outer space did something that is impossible. Like, no, she did it. It was very, very, very difficult, but it was possible, and that's why she did it. And it required that she tolerate / accept a level of pain that most of us would not. But I take pains to show, like, yes, she had physical injuries, but it was still physically possible for her to do what she did. It was just a matter of want to. You know, she made the choice. And I don't want to take the "what's your excuse" message too far. I'm granting that, like, even if you read and internalize everything I write in the book, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to go out and do the same thing. But it still, I think, provides kind of a pole star for you to guide your mental fitness journey.
Not many runners will have heard that story, I would guess, because they're not necessarily moving in the sphere of cross-country skiing. So I'd point our running fraternity towards that. It's a fantastic piece of reading.
Yeah, I definitely intentionally sought out diversity in terms of sport representation and, you know, nationality, and I wanted a nice even gender balance too. So because you know, it only helps like to just kind of on a almost subliminal level convey the message that we're not talking about any type here. It's like, it's just human athletes.
So you actually say that one of the things that can prevent us from accepting, like really accepting reality, is like our instincts.
Yes.
So I don't know if you want to talk about that a bit, because like it was really interesting. So there were 3 of them. There was fear and laziness, cognitive bias, and ego defense.
Right.
And you know, reading through those, like, even before I read the rest of the chapter, I could kind of see where you were going with that. And, you know, I could maybe see, you know, some of my own decisions in there, or like sometimes the things that we see other runners do where they will almost set themselves up for failure by, you know, doing some of these things.
Right. Yeah. The one that's probably trickiest to talk about is the ego defense one, because there we're talking about, you know, there's a human instinct that prevents us from accepting realities that force us to see ourselves in a way we don't want to see ourselves. You know, when we encounter realities that reveal, you know, flaws or limitations or whatever, however you want to call it, those can be tough to accept, but it's always worth it, you know. You know, if you're able to recognize, it's like, you know what, if I'm going to make progress, you know, just, it could be something, you know, as quote unquote shallow as just, you know, improving your marathon time or whatever, but you actually have to do some self work. You know, you have to change as a person to achieve that improvement. Again, that's one of the things I like, you know, about endurance sports, is that, you know, they go deeper than just looking at a piece of paper where your coach has written down what to do for your workout and following it. I mean,
I was super disappointed when I found out that was not going to.
But wait, are you still disappointed?
Yeah, no, not really, because, you know, it's been a few years now. I've read a lot of books since then, but yeah, I just remember it being, the simplicity just seemed so perfect until I was overtrained, and I only realized that I was overtrained after like 5 years of underperforming, and just like starting to have a hard time to even complete workouts. And then I figured out that I have to go about it a different way. It took me a long time. I finally got there.
Liz and I have a half marathon time trial tomorrow morning, which we're supposed to be running, but there's a bit of snow on the ground. Not very much, but probably enough just to impede our ideal terrain that we chose, our nice flat fast cycle path that we chose. Maybe it's not going to work.
No,
And
so the
now,
dilemma
and
is
now we've got ego defense coming in, fear and laziness coming in. Oh, it's not going to be as quick, and then we're gonna record a time, and then we're gonna feel bad about it, and it's not going to work for us.
okay. So let's have Matt evaluate which of the 3 flaws I have. So basically,
Well, first of all, we all do all 3.
oh, okay. Maybe it's a mix of all 3 then. But so see, the discussion yesterday on our easy run went kind of like this. So we did another time trial 4 weeks ago, and that was going to be because our coach is trying to keep us motivated. And some people are very motivated by having a goal, and some people don't need the goal to keep training. But for the benefit of like having something to gear a plan towards, he decided we're going to do a virtual half marathon. So like a time trial. And so we did one last month, and now it's like 4 weeks later, he planned another one for the same reason, because some people like doing those things. And for me, when, yesterday we were running through the snow, I was like, well, I'm not going to get a better time than last time. And I know we're going into the winter where all your performances kind of suffer, because we run outside all winter. The weather's terrible. Sometimes it's -20. Sometimes there's, like a foot of snow on the ground. So like, it's very much, you have to start going by effort and not pace. And for me, I get a lot of my confidence from running pace. And so because I ran a pace that I was happy with, and I was satisfied with kind of finishing the fall season with that result, I'm like, why would I run tomorrow if I know that the result is not going to be as good? And so now we're having this debate, because Alan is like, yes, but you can just go and get the benefit of having run the effort and, like have a, 10-minute slower time. But for me, I'm like, well, but then maybe I'm going to go into the long winter season that's going to be full of trudging through the snow, with my last memory being this time trial that will have been, like not a good time. So which one of these three flaws am I a victim of? Is it fear and laziness? Because that could be it. Cognitive bias, not really sure. Ego defense, yeah, I might be having ego defense problems here.
I'm going to go with number 1, fear and laziness, because really all you're doing is just not taking Alan's advice.
That's usually wise, by the way.
It's just I think if you weren't you could give Alan's advice to a runner facing the same conundrum. I like actually how utterly typical this example is, because comebacks aren't always just you get cancer and you almost die and then you have to come all the way back. It's a lot more of this kind of stuff, right? But it matters, like how you cope with this sort of thing, which happens almost every day in a runner's life. It adds up into your style of coping. So they're great opportunities to try and find a slightly better way of dealing. And I mean, I think from my perspective, what you're doing is you're allowing yourself to be dependent on proof that you are as fast as you want to be. And what accepting the reality in that situation would entail is just being able to account for the circumstances, just like not just intellectually, but sort of in your bones. Just say, and I'm not saying you have to do the half marathon, because like when you have that sense of obligation, that needs to be looked at, because oftentimes runners get into this trap where they feel like they do feel an obligation that isn't actually an obligation. And if they simply step back from it, it empowers them to make a choice. It's like, oh, I could do either A or B and be totally okay with either. It could be challenge myself or quit. Sometimes quit is absolutely the right thing to do, but you need to be clear in that decision and okay with it. So in your case, I mean, you really could go either way. You could say, all right, here's an opportunity to go ahead and run a time that, just as a sheer number would be, disappointing, but I'm going to contextualize that number and be able to have clarity about what it actually means. because so many runners would just say, if you did go ahead and do it, you do it, you run a time, it's not that good, and then you feel bad about it, even though rationally that doesn't make any sense at all.
No, I know it doesn't. Like, I know it makes no sense.
Yeah, so all you're doing with this exercise is just trying to get to a place where your emotions actually just have sort of a rational foundation, like that they're actually, like, how you feel about the run is appropriate to the facts on the ground. That's all you're trying to do.
And I guess so that's where Alan came in yesterday, and he's like, yeah, but the run that you did 4 weeks ago, even if you do a terrible run on Saturday, like, it doesn't take away the run you did 4 weeks ago. But in my head, it's almost like one replaces the other chronologically. So then, like, for the rest of the winter, I'm worried that I'm going to have this second run in my head. Yeah, as illogical as it is. Okay, good. So we know that that would fall under category number 1.
We also know that we're doing our time trial tomorrow.
Well, again, I want to underscore that, like, very seldom, because I have conversations like this with athletes I coach all the time, and I almost never tell them what to do. Like, I don't tell them what the right answer is. I get them to arrive at what the right answer is for them. I just try to clarify. So
basically, like, an ultra realist could do both. It's more the reason that they choose one choice or the other that makes the difference. So I guess if I'm not doing the time trial tomorrow because I'm afraid of the result, then that would be the wrong reason to not do it. But if I'm not doing it because I prefer to continue training and the hard effort would require a rest week, then that would be, like, I guess, more.
Yes, and I could even see a scenario where an athlete, an ultra realist in your situation, says, you know what, I feel like closing out the season on a high note, and I've had that, and I know 2021 is going to be a good year for me, but I just want to carry the good feeling that I got from that last time trial through the winter. That could totally serve your interests as a runner, to have that attitude. But again, it's based on clarity. It's not about, so many runners where it's a lack of confidence is what it is. Like, they become too dependent on things going well. and you want to minimize that. Like, you want to be confident regardless of numbers and whether things are going your way or not.
Tomorrow's probably a suboptimal scenario in terms of a little bit of snow on the ground and a bit of cold with respect to performance. It's probably a great opportunity for us to test ourselves out a little bit in a scenario where we're not strong, which is mental fitness in terms of embracing the reality of the situation. What we have is what we have. How do we optimize
the groundwork to then try and convince me tomorrow morning that we're going to do this time trial?
You can tell I'm the older person of our training group. So that would bring us into assuming that we're going to time trial tomorrow. That bring us into an opportunity to embrace reality, which is the next step. I think you describe it as making lemonade. Basically, you embrace the lemons, make some lemonade.
Yeah. I mean, I really love that cliche though it is, because that's exactly what the expression is about. So accepting reality means just admitting, I've been given lemons. Like, life has handed me lemons. There's no use pretending it didn't. I'm not going to imagine the lemons are actually a fruit I like better. They're lemons. Like that's accepting reality. And then embracing reality, embracing reality doesn't mean you try to lie to yourself and pretend that you're happy about it. It simply means that you commit to making the best of the situation. So you've accepted the situation for what it is, and now you say, all right, it's not the way I wanted it to be, but I'm still going to make the best of it. That's all that concept of embracing reality entails.
I guess like, in the steps of embracing reality, it seems like there are a few things that are recurring themes in other places where we've kind of read about the psychology of running, but it's good to have to know the what, the why, and the how. So like the what is like your goal, the why is your motivation and commitment, and the how
Is the how.
is the how, exactly. Kind of self-explanatory. I don't know, I was looking for a different way to explain it, but you know, like how do ultra realists kind of use these in their day-to-day? Because it's sort of, you know, I think we all sort of know why, and we all have a goal, and we all know how, because, you know, usually we all have a training plan, but it's really sort of the difference is almost in the day to day, and how they sort of attack the small obstacles that happen all the time.
Yeah, well, you know, what I'm talking about there is, well, you know, there's that famous Mike Tyson quote: "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth." So yeah, when things are going your way, everyone looks like they've got a great mental game. But I'm talking about what happens when your goal goes out the window. Most runners panic, or they fold. It's kind of like an all or nothing thing. Oh, it's like, well, you know, there's a headwind and I'm not going to PR, so who cares? You know, what's the point? You know, that's what I'm talking about. The situations where things haven't gone your way, and then what's the why? The what, the why, and the how. Yeah, on the how side, you know, I like the analogy from golf of scrambling. You know, scrambling, for the golfers listening, is, you know, if you've hit an errant tee shot and your ball ends up in a difficult lie, the kind of lie that you can't really practice, you know, that you have to scramble, you know, to make the best of the hole that has, you know, you can't take a mulligan and hit another tee shot. You know, your ball ended up where it ended up. Now you have to make the best of the situation. And so scrambling means you have to figure out how to, like there's, you don't have a blueprint for the situation you find yourself in. So there's a degree of uncertainty. You can't just say, oh, here's the tool I need for this job. You have to come up with something. Ultra realists tend to be good at that, not because like they've got the answer to every conceivable fiasco at hand, but because they're okay with the uncertainty, because they can accept it as just that. Like, it's like, I think there's a tendency when things go wrong for people to say, if I don't know how I'm going to solve this problem now, I'm going to assume I'll never know. Like, but that's not right. Like, if you don't know how you're going to solve it, that's it. It just means you don't know now. You know, to get back to a personal example, you know, with, you know, whatever I've got going on with my body right now, I can barely run, barely. And I don't know if it's going to get better. I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I don't know how much running is too much, where I'm setting myself back and prolonging it. There's a lot of uncertainty in my situation, and it's not just my running, it's my health. You know, pretty high stakes here. And then, yeah, I shouldn't minimize the running, because running is a huge part of who I am. So I have to scramble, and, you know, I'm trying to, you know, live my own advice by figuring it out, and not just like reflexively panicking because I don't know. I'm just, you know, trying to make smart decisions, trying to, you know, just take a step back from things whenever possible, so I can just, again, in a way, sort of analyze what's going on, almost as if I were a disinterested party, just trying to help a friend solve it or what have you. So, you know, those are the kinds of situations where, again, like it when things haven't gone wrong yet, the what, the why, and the how come pretty easily. But what happens when they've gone wrong? That's when you need to exhibit your ultra realist bona fides.
So actually, there's one specific scenario that comes up in the book, and I've had this happen to me. So you mentioned that athletes tend to forget how hard racing feels, and then they get a rude awakening during the race because it feels really hard. And I've I've had this experience with like shorter track races. Like we used to do these 2K time trials maybe once a month during the winter, because we would have like one day on an indoor track. And, it was kind of just a test of our fitness, but they were really hard. And from one to the next, it's like, I didn't remember it being so hard, but it would just feel really hard really quickly. And so do you have any suggestions on how we can avoid this particular problem?
I do. I mean, because that was my great weakness as a runner. My fear of suffering, particularly in races, ruined running for me in high school. Ruined it. I quit the sport because of that, and that alone. It just hurt too much to be as good as I wanted to be. And so when I got back into running later, and then triathlon, I wanted to work on that, because I just didn't like seeing myself as weak in that way. And so I have found, I have made a lot of progress in that way. So I feel like I know whereof I speak. And to me, just being intentional about it is hugely helpful. Just, when you go into a race, actually seek the suffering. Like, don't just sort of like, go into it like, I hope this is one of those races where it just flows out of me.
Yeah, because we think that happened, but probably it didn't. It's just,
right. I mean, if you race enough, some performances are going to flow out of you more than others. They might be within a pretty tight range where they all kind of suck, but still, you can kind of latch on to the ones where it comes a little more easily and hope the next one does. But those sorts of expectations are very self-defeating, because then maybe the next race will be relatively easy, but if that's the case, the next one after that surely won't. So you need to be always prepared for a grind. And I have found, just for myself, and also if you look at the ultrarealists, the ones who really can go deep into the pain cave, like Scott Fauble from NAZ Elite that I got to train with when I was a fake pro. He's one of those guys. And when you talk to them before a race, like, they'll talk to you just as much about seeking the suffering of the experience that's coming, just as much as their goal. I want to finish top 5 or whatever. So when you're sort of intentionally looking to see, like, how deep can I go? Like, can I outsuffer my competition in addition to out-fitnessing them? And it sounds like masochism, but it's not. Like, it simply is a painful sport.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have that sort of mentality, it's like, the pain is going to be there. And if I sort of, in a way, want it, or if I look at it as a tool where I just, rather than looking at it as like this necessary evil, it's just something that's intrinsic to the experience, and that I can either master or not. I have found that hugely helpful, and it seems to be something that that the toughest ultrarealists do as well.
I'm gonna try and seek the suffering the next time I race, hopefully in 2021.
Well, I will say, for me, again, I've made a lot of progress. It did not happen overnight.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I know that, in the marathon, that it's going to hurt at one point. And it's almost like you go in with a different mindset than when you're running like a 1,500 meter or something on the track. It's
Yes.
almost like because it's so well known for being hard. And so that around 30K, you should start to feel like things are very hard, and it's what you can do after that point that will define your result. But I guess we don't always go in with the same mindset when we run the shorter races.
Yeah, exactly. So I find as a coach that most runners, they don't like VO2 max type workouts for the same reason. Like, they want the suffering to sneak up on them. Like, I don't know if it's a personality type or what, but like, so I think there's a lot you can do in training, to sort of seek the suffering. In my book, I talk about in my Ironman journey that I did to sort of walk the talk. I talk about doing some things routinely in training precisely because I hated them. Like they were beneficial in whatever other way, but that wasn't really the point. Like I could have done something alternative, but I chose to do those specific things because they sucked. And you get a lot out of that, like you're just practicing embracing things that are not easy for you to embrace.
I guess that's a good defense for trail running, because Alan and my boyfriend, they really enjoy trail running, and so every year they want to incorporate a trail race. And me and trails, we're just hills are they're hard, and it's hard for my mental because you have to walk up the hill and it makes your pace be like 14 minutes per kilometer, which just doesn't give me any confidence. But I do it because I know that they enjoy it. So you have to sometimes do things that other people enjoy, not just things that you enjoy.
I think for us, it's fun. For you, it's base building. I mean, you got a PR 3 months later after
True.
doing all your trail work.
True. So it was beneficial, but yeah, not my favorite thing for sure.
So, for us, we're just communing with the flowers and running through the grasses. And for you, you're just grafting out volume.
I'm just hanging on for dear life. I'm like, oh no, I can't see them anymore. I have to try and figure out where they all went.
I guess part of what you're saying there, Matt, really is if you do the thing that the aspect of the work that sucks, it probably sucks for you because you're not very good at it. If you don't like it, one of the reasons you don't like it is, among other things, could be that you're not very good at it. So if you focus on it, it has the greatest scope for an improvement. And this is what fascinates me about the whole book, the Comeback Quotient, as a whole, in terms of mindset and mental training. We don't do it much, and so we're probably not very good at it. So if we could extract some things out of it and focus on it where we're not really so interested or we find it difficult. In fact, it might contain some elements of, I said at the start in my story, it could contain the element that could really take me to, my personal comeback. Could be that little make difference element.
And the cool thing about it is that it's not something you have to make time for. You know what I mean? Like, as I said earlier in our discussion, your mind is always there. It's always along for the ride, when you're training. So why not just start using it? That's all you have to do. But you don't have to carve out time for another type of workout.
Yeah, you don't need any extra time, but you do need to switch it on. I think you need to be conscious of it.
Exactly.
Sort of consciously switch it on. The 3 steps to embracing reality that you talk about in your book are an internal locus of control, a growth mindset, an attitude of gratitude or positivity. As average non-elites, what do the high performers tell us about that, and how can we apply some of that?
Right. An internal locus of control just refers to a tendency to see yourself as being responsible, as an agent, as being responsible for what happens next in your life, that you feel like you have control over, your destiny, whereas an external locus of control is a tendency to think of yourself as.
I worked in management, and I read a book called Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
Yeah.
And he talks about proactivity, and he says, as humans, we should be responsible. And he breaks that into 2 words: responsible.
Right.
We're conscious of what the input is, and then we're selecting the response. I think what you're saying there kind of jives a little bit with that.
Yes.
So my management training is going to help me.
Yeah. Well, in that part of that section of the chapter, I give an example from a study that was done in the business domain about how difference making it is to have that internal locus of control. It's not like, I'm not saying that some people actually have more control than others do. I'm talking about it's mindset. You see yourself as having more control. You always want to see reality clearly and to intellectually know exactly how much control you have and don't have. But, layered on top of that is just sort of a bias. People who tend or ultra-realists tend to, skew toward that feeling. The example I give is, which is, an exaggeration. There's a kitchen fire. The person with the external locus of control yells, "Fire, somebody do something." And the person with an internal locus of control grabs a fire extinguisher.
Ah, that's a good description. I hope that I'm the second person. There's a fire.
Well, I think, we're all both. I don't want to paint in too brush strokes that are too broad, but it's just it's helpful, I think, to gain awareness. If you haven't thought about these concepts before, just to be like, okay, where do I fall on this spectrum? And the idea is, no matter where you fall, to seek improvement.
You also talk about the psychologist Carol Dweck, and actually, she's got a lot of videos on YouTube about growth mindset, because you mentioned her. I think you mentioned her book in your book, because she also wrote a book. But yeah, those are really interesting if people want to look at that. A growth mindset is just it kind of makes you realize that you have maybe more control over situations than you think you do. Sort of like the idea of having talent. Like, some people are like, oh, talent is like this fixed thing, but if you have a growth mindset, then you're gonna try and find ways to become better at something that you want to be better at. I like to think that we have a lot of control over what we do and how we can perform better. So, like, just because we don't want to keep you for much longer, but there's a whole section about self-sabotage, and I feel like everybody kind of self-sabotages themselves, like, at some point in their life. And for athletes, that could be always falling short of your goals because of because you get really discouraged in the middle of a race, and so you end up thinking that it's like pointless, and oh, I don't care anyway about this race or this outcome, and then you end up falling short of your goal. How can we sort of try to avoid self-sabotage? Do you have any tips for us?
I've got a whole chapter on
Yep.
But having read the book, this. I go pretty deep in this book, because I really do believe that it's a human journey, and to improve your mental game, you can't really do it at a superficial level, and self-sabotage tends to have deep roots in our psychological makeup, and those roots go all the way back to our earliest experiences. So that's another area where it may seem like the smallest thing, like you like have a pattern of not backing off early enough when you have an incipient injury, and turning small problems into big problems. You may find, if you decide, what, this has happened for the last time, like I'm going to break this pattern, you might find that the work required to do that necessarily moves you toward becoming a better version of yourself. And the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche has this concept of becoming who you are that I talk about in this chapter, and the idea is that nobody's perfect, nobody's ever going to be. We're not all moving toward being exactly the same athlete. Like there's no one single way to be an ultra realist. But the idea is just to sort of work with what you've got, to assess, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and, my flaws or my limitations or whatever, my growth areas. And those usually in that latter bucket, those items are the ones you need to work on in order to overcome any kind of pattern of self-sabotage. An example I give in the book is of a runner I know who wanted to qualify for Boston, kept failing. He clearly had the ability to do it, and through a process of introspection, he realized that he simply feared failure, so he gave himself excuses to fail so that it would never be his fault. And that's a great example of ego defense, where he was it took him a long time to realize that about himself, because who wants to realize that about themselves? It's like I intentionally make myself fail. No one wants to admit that, but admitting it precipitated a breakthrough for him. And after that, he would qualify for Boston every time he ran a marathon. And it's just, obviously his talent level didn't change, but his mind changed, and he grew as a person in a way that helped him to overcome self-sabotage and achieve important goals.
I guess we'll just try and finish it off. I mean, we could probably go on to talk about all the examples you gave in the book. One of them being Lionel Sanders, which one of the things that he discovered was his addictive personality, and then he transferred that to sport, and so he got off being addicted to drugs, which I found was like quite a story.
That's an extreme self-sabotage, I guess.
Yeah.
I think your average person probably just does little things.
Yes, I mean, yeah, there isn't a runner out there who can't, kind of put their failures or setbacks, any sort of problem they encounter, put those things under a microscope and find some responsibility for them that comes back to them. It's not just always bad luck.
Yeah. So what's the main thing that you hope that readers will take away from your book?
I hope they buy in, to this concept. The book officially hasn't even been released yet. And, I'm a little nervous about it because it is sort of a novel message. And it's not necessarily telling people what they want to hear. I mean, there's kind of an irony there, because I'm telling people you got to face reality. And well, are they willing to face the reality that they've got to face reality? If they aren't, I'm not going to sell many books.
Yeah, and it's true that I think most runners will buy all the training books first before they start to think well, maybe I need to change my mental, because I mean, I'm a perfect example. I read all the Hanson's marathon method and, all kinds of other things before I started looking at performance mindset and those kinds of things. Like Carol Dweck's book, that came way later, because for me it was oh no, you need to be more fit. And so how do I get more fit? But actually you can gain a huge advantage by having the right mindset. So I think you're doing us a favor. I think it's for some people, if they don't pick up this book right away, it's only because, they're not there in their process yet. But I think eventually everybody eventually admits it to themselves that their mindset needs a little bit of work sometimes.
And if not, you can just read it for the stories.
The stories are amazing and super inspiring. I mean, like Lionel Sanders, I had no idea, but he was just, he went to all the way, hit rock bottom. I mean, he was at the point where he was in his garage, I think, wanting to hang himself, commit suicide. And the only reason he didn't was because he thought of his mom blaming herself about his death, and so he didn't commit suicide. And you go from that, and now he's just, he dominates triathlon. I don't know if he still does, but he was pretty much a household name. I mean,
certainly your description of the story had me scrambling through YouTube to actually see some of the races that you describe. Wow, I don't remember this. Let me see if I can find it on video somewhere and check it out. It works as a story. It had me fully captured, fully engaged.
I think also you having your own little journey in there kind of adds to that, because people can learn from it, and if they're not ready to apply it to themselves, they can see how you applied it to yourself, and they can read the inspiring stories along the way. So
right on.
Well done.
Thank you.
I think, as opposed to being a super young athlete, I'm a wizened old manager, and so I've actually read dozens and dozens more than running books. I've read management books, and I see the crossover between the mentality factors. Management books are just looking to optimize that in terms of human output to some extent within the workplace, and same techniques, trying to orient towards maximizing the human output as a runner. To that extent, I thought, oh wow, I never really thought of it like that. And given that, I was in the arena and hadn't thought of it like that, people who are running and training probably haven't thought about it at all like that. And given that they haven't, the scope for improvement is perhaps larger in this arena. So if you want a sales pitch for your book in terms of having the courage to admit to it, there's maybe a huge benefit to be gained. I'm just, running with more gratitude in this time of COVID, saying, well, it's just great to be outside instead of it sucks that we can't, go team training and have organized marathons and events. Let's focus on the positivity of being outside in the fresh air, enjoying the training, doing it for the joy of doing it. And in fact, that returns. It returns in your training. You find, well, that wasn't so difficult. You look at the time, wow, that's quite quick. Suddenly you're starting to reprogram yourself. But it takes work.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the idea, is that there's so much. I mean, it obviously, if you have a bad situation that you can actually make better, you'd be a fool not to, right? But I guess, kind of the core message of this book is that even to the extent that you can't change the situation, you can completely transform your experience of it, just by meddling with the contents of your head. I mean, you really can. You can make the same situation seem much better just by facing reality.
That's good. That's a good closing statement.
Yeah.
I like that. So in terms of the actual physical book, we did get a copy, and it's got Molly Seidel sort of on the front cover. I think that's when she was second at the Trials Marathon. Is that right?
It is.
Yeah, that was a good choice.
I was there. That's right. That's where I picked up that virus there in Atlanta.
Oh dear.
Oh no. Oh, that was early. That was back in February, I think.
It's a fairly iconic photograph on the front of the book, though.
Yeah, it's a good one. She's stoked about it too. She wanted a signed copy when she saw. As far as I know, she hasn't been on the cover of a book before, and she's very happy about it.
Won't be the last time though, but you were the first.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Not that authors get to choose their own covers, but I'm happy about it too.
So do you have another book in the thought process or in the preparation process?
I do indeed. And for those listening who just were not at all persuaded by the efforts we made to convince them that the Comeback Quotient is the book for them, I'm collaborating with Ben Rosario, the coach of NAZ Elite,
yes,
on a real nuts and bolts training book called Run Like a Pro, Even If You're Slow.
Oh,
that'll be out next year.
Okay,
sounds like a good one. We better get our orders in.
Yeah, Ben is just such not just a great coach, but a great guy. So just, I like writing books by myself, but it's been a total blast, even with the limitations of the pandemic, to collaborate with him on this project.
Oh, that's amazing. I can't wait to read that. And then hopefully have both of you on the podcast.
Yes.
That would be fun.
Or just him. If you're sick of me, I won't take it amiss.
No.
No, you're like the superstar, so you have to be there.
Well, thank you for that.
We want to see you fully fit and healthy as well next time.
Yes.
Yep. Hearing about your next athletic pursuit.
So Liz, why don't you just give us your summary thoughts on the book? I'll do mine, and you can maybe do our outro.
Okay, so I think I pretty much said it. It's a great read about the importance of mindset, process orientation, and dealing with reality. And there are, some very helpful tips that each of us can use to think more like an ultra realist. And the actual book itself is it's quite a nice cover. Like, I like the picture of Molly Seidel. I like the print, the Comeback Quotient, on the white background. I think it really stands out, and I think everybody should read it.
Now the UK people are going to feel left out because they've got an alternate cover.
Yep.
Oh,
So, but they don't know Molly Seidel as much, so maybe they're happy with their cover.
Actually,
Yeah.
I've already had a complaint from one UK reader. It's like, why can't we have Molly on our cover?
Oh, really?
oh.
It's like,
That's
not my
nice.
decision.
Yeah, from my perspective, another Matt Fitzgerald winner in terms of being an easy book to read. Each section has some learning, so it tries to teach you something, but it also has some great stories and examples. So, you get dosed with a little bit of, oh yeah, it's good food for thought, but also, wow, look at this person. How did they do that? Wow, what's going on in their heads to achieve that? Seriously, wow stories, which give us, as I said, give us great conversational topics while we were out doing our long winter training runs in Montreal. It's kind of like an adventure book with some learning in it, and also includes you as a guinea pig, Matt, in terms of, here's a chapter and here I am in my Ironman and this is what I'm trying to do with it. So you'll see the sort of practical examples. The book gets to live vicariously through you. Personally, I think it's a great motivational book for the average runner who wants to do better, because I think the scope for improvement in our mental approach is great, and doesn't cost you anything in terms of, you don't have to go to the gym for an hour to do your mental training and extra laundry because you've been doing your mental training. No, you can do it simultaneously with other things. And of course, there's an epic photograph of Molly Seidel on the front of the edition.
You can judge a book by its cover.
So thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews, and a big thank you to the publisher, Velo Press, for providing a review copy of the book, and also for putting us in touch with Matt. And thank you to Matt, as always, for spending time with us today. If you'd like to leave us feedback about what we can improve, or you have book suggestions for future episodes, then you can leave us a comment on social media. So we are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, we're reviews_running. You can also send us an email. We're just Running Book Reviews, all in one word, @gmail.com.
And where can people find you, Matt, if they want to avail themselves of your training or get in contact with you otherwise?
Yeah, the place to start would be my personal website, which is mattfitzgerald.org.
And that'll be also where we'll get a copy of the book, is that right? If people want to pre-order, would they pre-order through your website?
Exactly so, yep.
We didn't mention, it's a fantastic Christmas present. People should buy it for everyone for Christmas.
For sure.
Okay, so thanks for listening, and tune in next time for another episode of Running Book Reviews.